Hey everyone, this is Valerie De La Rosa. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, so just hang tight.
Valerie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just getting that
Wow.
on now. Yeah. Okay, it looks like we have everyone here on the committee as well as our panelists.
Could you also add Mary Sneed?
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go.
How have you been?
Good, thank you. All right. Okay, so we have some comments that people were worried about the audio. Sorry, everyone. We were just giving just a few minutes to get started. So my name is Valerie Della Rosa, and I am the chair of the Reopening Working Group for Manhattan Community Board 2. I'm going to introduce the other members of the committee. We've got Daniel Miller here. He is the first vice chair, and he is also on this committee. We also have Donna Raftery, who is here. She is one of the chairs of the SLA committee. We have Bob Ely, who is also another chair of the SLA committee. We also have, I'm trying to see, Joe Gallagher, who's here, and he's the chair of the Quality of Life Committee. So I think I've got everyone from the committee. And then, of course, we have Carter Booth joining us, who is the chair of Community Board 2. So tonight, so the Reopening Working Group, as you know, was created to address the reopening as it relates to our district. And so we've kind of launched this series called Restarting Together, and it's just restarting together, and then fill in the blank. So we're launching it off tonight with Restarting Together University. So I'm going to introduce our guest this evening. We also have, I'm going to let Carter Booth, though, say just a few words really quickly. Carter?
We're really excited tonight to have NYU and the new school, both very important members of our community. And obviously there's a lot of questions and people are very curious about their plans in re-engaging with the community after a hiatus, and we're looking forward to hearing more. I know that there are a lot of members of the public who had a lot of questions that we've received, so we're looking forward to hearing what your plans are. Thanks.
Thank you, Carter. So just to let you know how the evening will go, we're going to start out tonight. We're going to have NYU go first. So tonight we have with us Arlene Peralta, who is the Senior Director for NYU Community Engagement. And we also have joining us this evening, Dr. Carlo Ciotoli, if I got that right, who's the Executive Lead for NYU's COVID-19 Prevention and Response Team, and Associate Vice President for NYU Student Health and Executive Director of Student Health Center. So Arlene will be giving a short presentation, and Dr. Ciotoli will be here during the Q&A portion. So we're going to have Arlene will take over in just a minute, and then we also have joining us, we have Amy Malsin, who is the Assistant Vice President for Communications and Public Affairs. Did I get that right? Okay, good. Who's joining us along with Mary Sneed, who heads up communications and it's been really great to work with as well. So they will also give a short presentation. So we've asked for the presentations to be about 5 to 7 minutes each, so we can hear all of them, because I feel as though the questions we would like them to be addressed by both institutions. So if we could just, Arlene, if you're ready to go, you should be able to share your screen. And just to let everyone else know, we will be doing a Q&A. We do have questions that were submitted. We did ask, and I've grouped those into 4 areas, which are circulation, enforcement, state travel advisory, and testing protocols. That seems to be the general themes. So I know we will get to some of those, as well as putting your questions in the chat. We will get to them, and then we will ask you to raise your hand. And we'll have members of the committee ask questions first, and then we will go to members of the public and then other board members. And that reminds me that we do have other Community Board 2 members joining us this evening. So we've got Adam Zeldin, who is joining us, who is a board member, as well as Michael Levine. So if they have their camera turned off, you may not see them, but they are here joining us. So with that, finally, Arlene, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Carter. Thank you, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Arlene Peralta. I'm the Senior Director of Community Engagement at NYU. I know many of you guys on the community board and in the community. I am actually, having a virtual Zoom is definitely different, and I do miss being in the village. But I'm going to be quick because Carlo, thank you so much for joining us, only has until 7:30. And so we're both going to try to answer as much of your questions as we can. And once he has to leave, I'll try my best. Obviously, I'm no expert. I am just the messenger. So with that, let me share my screen. Hopefully I do this right. You guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good. So I'm joined by my colleague Carlo, which Valerie, thank you for giving him such a warm welcome. So just really quickly about Carlo, he's been at the Student Health Center for 22 years, and I could be getting this information wrong, but he's trained as an internist and a pulmonologist, and all his training has been in airborne diseases. So I really appreciate him joining us because I know he's been really busy planning our prevention and response. And so I just want to take you through a few slides quickly. I really wouldn't call it a reopening for us. The university never closed. A lot of our essential employees, our workers, our facilities, our public safety team have been on the ground since March, and they're still working hard. Since we went remote, the university has really been working with subject matter experts and people on the ground about what this looks like. Our plans clearly and closely adhere to state guidance for higher education. And we did submit a plan to the governor's office for our reopening. All complying with state guidance, which really are amongst the toughest, which is no surprise as the governor has been just, really great at keeping our numbers low. And so going back to those plans, the team really developed an evidence-informed multi-layered public health strategy to reduce the risk posed by COVID. No single intervention, I think you guys have heard this and we've read so much in the news, really prevents the spread. It's really about layers of safety to decrease the risk of spreading COVID. I know for the fall 2020, it's accompanied by, an uncommon degree of anxiousness, uncertainty, concern, and that's rightfully so. I just really want to reiterate that our plans are in place to address, respond to, and mitigate the spread of COVID. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the community on things that your areas of concern and things that we maybe didn't think of or things that we should be doing better. And also my office is always a resource for all questions and concerns. And so, the university plans to strictly enforce. I know one of the questions is enforcement and how we're going to enforce this behavior, especially amongst students. And, we're putting in place a lot of measures both in and out of NYU buildings. A lot's at stake in observing these rules conscientiously, including the health of everyone at NYU, but the greater community and the progress that's been made in New York. All students are going to be required to read and acknowledge a student code of conduct requirement that agrees to certain behavioral standards, not just in NYU buildings, but also outside. And these same rules will govern our faculty and employees that are coming back. So needless to say, there's a lot of flexibility on our part on a lot of this and a lot of the plans. It's not all set in stone, but a lot of our guidance was, this is just the quick agenda, but a lot of our guidance was based obviously on the governor's office for the Center for Disease and Control, and then the Commission of Independent Colleges and Universities, amongst others. And a lot of our guiding principles from the state have been about how are we reopening, how are we monitoring things, how are we testing, how are we containing, what would be our shutdown plans. And a lot of these things were based on guiding principles for the university. Some of them I've listed here, such as creating layers of safety, maintaining the highest level standard of teaching and learning, creating a flexible fall, spring, summer schedule, responding flexibly and quickly to an ever-evolving public health landscape, as we have seen since March. And so these layers of safety, again, no one single intervention is going to prevent the spread of COVID. And I know Carlo will talk a lot about more of this in the questions, but rather the strategy is to implement these layers of safety between testing and contact tracing and quarantining and physical distancing and reducing density in our buildings, symptom screenings, enhanced cleanings, education and awareness campaign, and compliance, obviously, at the end of the day. And so I will leave it for Q&A with regards to all the testing pieces and the contact tracing, I think, Valerie, just in terms of, I could go on and on about the information that we have, but I think that makes the most sense just to get through everything quickly.
Sure.
Okay. And I just quickly just want to give you like big picture overview. I think that even for me, you know, obviously in any given fall, we see an influx of students, faculty, and staff return to NYU and return to the village. It's not going to look like the same thing as it typically does in past years. You know, we have anywhere from 50,000 undergrad and grad students. It's not going to look like that. You know, right now, half of our classes are going to be taught remotely. All of our classrooms will hold fewer than 50% of students that it did before. In line with all those physical distancing guidelines. Our student residence halls will be over 40% less occupancy than usual. So it's not like you're going to see move-in happen as it usually does, and all of our residence halls full at capacity. It's going to be 40% or less. And then operationally for administrators and faculty, you know, at least for me, I've been remote since March and will continue to be remote through the fall. And that goes for a lot of administrators, unless they're essential employees, like our public safety team, our facilities team, and people that are providing student resources and assistance.
And, if you could, and Arlene, if you, not to interrupt, but if you could provide the link to your hub, if you could you can either just put it in the chat to all panelists and attendees. You just do it to one, then I'll make sure it gets sent out. Yeah,
I could do that after I go through this, no problem. And so, you know, I think our mantra has been flexibility in the curriculum. It's going to be a hybrid model. A lot of the classes will be taught online, some in person, but very small sections. As I mentioned before, we're reducing density in our classroom spaces. And we've designed a really robust January and summer term. So students do not have to take, you know, their courses all in the fall, all in the spring. So there's no need to clump. And then students can choose to work, to do what works academically for them. I know a lot of times folks see our international students around, and obviously we're not gonna have the large number that we typically do either. I will rush through, in terms of faculty and employees, again, teaching online or in person, continued teleworking for the majority of employees, and then our essential employees and research continues. But again, the key is reducing density amongst all of our students, faculty, and employees across the board. So it's not going to look like a typical year. So in terms of promoting healthy and safe behavior, the university has launched a university-wide Keep Each Other Safe campaign, which urges NYU employees, faculty, students to protect each other in the greater New York City community by abiding by health and safety policies. We're doing an extensive public service campaign, letters to parents, a mandatory training module, and the creation of a 200 to 300 core of student health ambassadors who are charged with peer-to-peer monitoring and compliance. So not only will this be sent through social media and through emails and through our website that Valerie mentioned, but is also through wayfinding and directional signage inside our buildings, as you can see here. And so, so that's going to be happening across campus to really reinforcing the message. Again, it's not just about what's happening inside of our buildings, it's also what's happening outside, and reinforcing that message that you know, to keep all of each other safe and keep the numbers low, everyone has to, one, maintain proper social distance, and B, wearing their masks and all the other layers of safety that I mentioned earlier. And I think that's it, because I had a lot more information, but I cut it just to run through it quickly, because I'd rather leave time for Q&A, which I know that there's a few that you sent over, Valerie, that I didn't get a chance to look at. So I will stop sharing my screen for now, if that's okay. Carlo, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or if we just want to wait till questions.
No, I think we'll wait for the questions, and then I think what I'll do is elaborate depending on the question and try to give as robust an answer to the general topic of the question.
Perfect. Yes, you're the expert in the room, not me, so that would be great. Thank you. And then I'll share that in the chat right now, Valerie. I'll share the link to the NYU Returns Hub. And just to add, we are creating in the NYU Community Engagement website, we're creating an FAQ page that will help make it easier to find a lot of these common questions that are going to be asked tonight, and then others that we've put together. Once I have that up and running, I'll share that with you, Valerie. So you can share that also as well.
Great. Okay. Okay, so now we will go to Amy Malsin. Will you be presenting?
Yes, yes. I just wanted to say, thank you, Eddie, of course, for inviting us. I think this is such an important discussion to have. We've been on a slightly different path, I think, than NYU. We're not as big. We've had to make different decisions based on what we would refer to as a very vertical campus, which poses a host of different challenges than when you have a lot of real estate that allows you to, and sorry, that's somebody texting me, a lot of real estate that allows you to spread out wide. We went remote, of course, as everyone did in March when New York went on pause, and ultimately decided to go online for the fall. Given what we know today, we believe that remote learning is the best option for the health and safety of our community and for preventing the spread of the virus. And that has to be our highest priority. You know, this approach for us ensures also that students have continued access to classes regardless of where they are located. Like NYU, we have a significant international population, and that was something that was very important to us to consider. But also a remote fall provides greater flexibility for us to respond effectively during a time when the path of the virus is changing rapidly. Mary knows this, I am not the most technically minded person, so you're all going to bear with one moment as I figure this out. And I just do want to say that my staff would be rolling, I'm sure Mary is, but others would be rolling their eyes right now as I try and do this. So please feel free to comment amongst yourselves, but try to not let me know. Okay, so share screen, right? Yep. Okay, let's do this. And I'm, okay, did that work? I just want to say, brilliant. So we are reopening our plan because we did close. We sent students home in March for spring break and never brought them back. We are looking at a phased reopening. This is a comprehensive plan based on how we think we can safely reopen our campus and welcome back students. There are several stages to our plan, certainly beginning with fall, but continuing through the entire year. All of this, not dissimilar to what you heard from Arlene, is to ensure the continuity of our teaching, learning, and research mission. Our plans, of course, adhere to the advice of public health experts and is in complete compliance with the practices that Cuomo has outlined, as well as health and safety experts. We all have principles that we were following. Ours, and I'm just going to change, if I may, how I see, there we go, so I can read my own slides. Ours, as I mentioned, one of our guiding principles, the one that overrides all else, is protecting the community. And that's not just our community, but it's our neighbors. We need to maintain the highest quality teaching experience, to ensure that learning, research, and cultural expression continues without interruption across every department and every specialty that we offer. And something that's very important to the new school is that access is equitable, that there is no difference between what a student who is wealthier versus a student who is less wealthy can do or learn with us. Sorry, I think I have to, there we go. We also moved to a 3-term calendar for the academic year. Typically we'd be 2 semesters like NYU, but have added in a winter intensive, which will allow students who are contemplating a slightly lighter fall in the hopes that something that we have been discussing, a spring will allow a much more significant return to campus. That is something that we haven't decided at this point. It's something we are preparing for, but we very much are able to be flexible and continue the academic year remotely if that's necessary. Spring, regardless though, would be a much more intensive semester for students, whether it's remote or not, and would bring into play many of the experiences that they get when they are on campus. Summer, of course, would allow students to make up what they may not have been able to do earlier in the year and to continue to access facilities that we feel are essential to the education we offer. Mary, I was going to ask you to take over for the fall. Are you able to jump in?
Yes, I'll jump in right now. Thanks, Amy. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the specifics we have planned for our fall 2020 semester. So as Amy mentioned earlier, all of our classes will be online, just continuing what we did in March. And again, because of the nature of our campus, we just felt that this was the best way to ensure the safety for our community. With that, though, there will be a gradual reopening of some of our campus buildings. These are specifically the ones that students need access to for their creative making, their projects, their research, or artistic activity, because some of these design-heavy programs, they do need access to specialized equipment. So the buildings will be the Sheila Johnson Design Center, which is at 66 Fifth Avenue at 13th Street, the Arnold Hall on 55 West 13th Street, 25 East 13th Street, and then our University Center, which is basically our campus hub. That's our main building located at 63rd Fifth Avenue. And now with the reopening of all those buildings, they will be in alignment with the city and state regulations. So we will have protocols in place to ensure the social distancing, the cleaning of the buildings, and just making sure that we're adhering to all the necessary regulations to keep everyone safe. And then, so similar to NYU, most of our employees will continue to work remotely through the end of 2020. With that, though, there will be a return for some of our essential operations staff who will be returning to campus in advance of our fall semester, and they will be back on campus on August 17th. And we are having access to some of our residence halls, and it's on a very limited priority basis. And it's going to be, the capacity is a lot less this year than normal, again, to meet the required social distancing guidelines. But we do have some students, again, we want to make sure that everybody has the access and there's equal access to all of our facilities. So we are opening this up on a limited basis to some of our students.
I'd like to add that like NYU and truly I think any university in New York City, for the very small number of students who will be in our dorms, and that will be in Carey Hall, which is the University Center building, all had to self-quarantine for 2 weeks before they were allowed on campus. We have required testing. There will be daily self-screens that we require. There is a registration system to access any of the facilities. It is not a walk around campus and go in whenever you like. sort of operation at this point. We are maintaining a very rigid environment to ensure that they are safe in Cary Hall, in the dorms themselves, one person per suite. So, ensuring that there is enough distance. There will be small pods that will work together and be able to socialize some, and those will be groups that will be formed and maintained throughout. I think importantly, the staff that is on campus have all tested and will be tested regularly and are fully up to speed on, what needs to happen to ensure a safe environment. Look, I'm sure NYU has done all of this as well, but we have reconfigured our airflow systems. Of course, you saw the way they, and I love that image, by the way, but with the stand here signs and how to access your pathway through a building or a floor. For us, again, we are very much a vertical campus, and this will extend to how people can operate in elevators and all spaces. We are not providing dining services or any such. So the few students that are here will be purchasing meals from local vendors. And again, it's a very limited operation to begin with this fall. We have at this time 160 students in the residential hall. That's it. Again, I'm happy to come back at a later date and let you know what plans are and how those are forming for spring, but we couldn't even begin to say anything definitive at this time about that.
Great. Thank you so much. I guess we can go ahead and disable the screen share. Thank you very much, Amy and Mary. So I would like to start with the, I've got the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we'll go to members of the committee and the public, and then other board members, other CB2 board members, because we really want to hear from the public. And I know that we have Dr. Ciotoli's time is limited, so I'd like to get started. I'm going to go quickly as well as from what I saw in the chat as well. And for both institutions, do you have a percentage of positive cases that would lead to a shutdown or a limited participation of on-campus activities? And I know the new school that already have a small number, but is there any sort of table in place that's public that Dr. Ciotoli that would lead to a lockdown?
So one of the things that we're doing certainly is following what the city has done. If you know, the city has discrete positivity rates for opening schools, closing schools. So we'll certainly continue to track that. One of the big unknowns for us is we do not know where we are starting from. So we are just bringing back our first cohort of students this week who will be coming to quarantine. To those of you who live near campus, you will see a big tent up on West 4th Street. We are doing mass testing for students coming back. So I think one of the key things will be, where are we starting from? What is our positivity rate to start? And then we will be doing ongoing testing throughout the semester. So while we will, and certainly to some sense mimic, I think, and follow what the city is doing, what's also important are specific trends. We may be at 0.5% and then go up to 1.5% within a week, and that might not be sort of a traditional trigger point, but a rapid rise might cause just as quick an action to be more restrictive as hitting a trigger, a single trigger point after several weeks. We have a whole host of things that we're going to measure over the course of the semester, so I don't think we're going to rely on a single point. And then obviously we will have to follow the dictates of both the city and state, who have been, particularly at the state level, fairly sort of controlling and allowing or not allowing certain industries and activities to occur. So again, I think we will be directed by the state largely, but again, we will have a whole host of measures that we will follow, not only absolute values, but also trends, so that we will both, be more restrictive if we need to be, or potentially relax if the numbers stay low, much like the state has done over the past 2 months.
Great. I didn't know if Amy, do you guys have any?
Do have a containment plan in place. With such a small community, I think this is going to be, really looking at floor by floor in Cary Hall, what that means. But we will absolutely move people out and put into motion an extensive plan created by our Student Health Services group to ensure that people are quarantined and testing is happening, and that we are working with New York City Contact Tracing Corp, et cetera, to ensure that it isn't unnecessarily inhibiting or infecting others.
Great. That kind of leads into some other questions about testing protocols. So I'm going to kind of just put two questions out there for both of you. How will these outbreaks, or increases in that rapid rise that you mentioned that becomes critical to the community, how will those be, I don't want to say outbreak, but how will that be communicated to the community? Is there some sort of, is it going to be on the NYU return site? Is there going to be any sort of, or on the new school site? Like, will there be any sort of, I know I've seen other universities that have had very kind of anonymous, a student was positive, or they've listed out maybe individuals. So kind of curious as to, like, if I'm living near the campus and I am a resident, how am I going to find out about that rapid rise or cause for concern?
I think it's probably going to be different for NYU than for us, because again, we have a very small community there. But we would, on our website, if we had to shut down, we would announce it there and make sure that we connected immediately with local health authorities and city officials, and ensure that the information got out to all of our partners in the community, and any other appropriate personnel that should be notified. I don't have a plan to say that we'll do it exactly this way yet. We are, truthfully, and perhaps this is true as well for NYU, still working through so many of these questions. I'm sure anyone who's listening knows how the information is changing every day, and we are trying to keep up with it and ensure that we are operating in the safest way possible. But again, for us, it's a small community, and I think it might be easier to contain no matter what happens with the size of it.
And I would just add on the NYU side that there is discussion about some degree of public transparency with cases. I think the exact data is still being discussed, but I think there is some desire to have some degree of transparency in aggregate. So obviously there won't be individual names or specific schools, but in aggregate, I think there is some desire for that transparency. And then second, just to touch on contact tracing. We have had multiple calls with the city. We have a direct line to them. They now have a direct line to us. Every university was asked to provide a liaison so that there is a much better coordinated effort of contact tracing. I think most people would agree that people local in the community are best positioned to do contact tracing the quickest, which is key. So we have developed our own internal cohort of people to do contact tracing within the NYU community, but knowing that we will liaise with the city for that overlap where broader community members are interacting with NYU community members and vice versa, so that we're ensuring that everyone who needs to be contacted, if there is a potential exposure, does get contacted. And I'm sure New School's been on those calls as well, but there's been a series of them over the last several weeks to sort of develop that relationship between the city and the colleges and universities.
And the protocols so that we can work together well, yes.
Correct.
Great, great. My next question that we've received, the next question, NYU specifically, I know you guys have talked about random testing, and I know there's a desire for people in the community to know, like, how is the random testing going to happen? I know it's a little, excuse the street noise outside. Love the city. Kind of how will random testing work, just to kind of give a little broader look at that for everyone.
Yep. So I think our goal is to, maximize and test as many people as we can on a regular basis. I think we are in negotiations with multiple labs to ramp up our capacity, but I think the goal would be to test the entire community, faculty, staff, and students on some regular basis, sort of to be determined, so that over, some period of time, let's say a month, everybody's been tested at least once, if not more frequently. And there might be some groups that we feel are higher risk, who we might test more frequently. But the goal would be to get everybody tested within some sort of cycle of time. And again, I think that'll depend a little bit on the overall prevalence of disease, the lab capacity, the testing capacity we have, and what we're seeing on campus. If we're seeing that the residence halls are more problematic, and we're getting isolated cases popping up there, we might ramp up the frequency of testing there. If we're seeing it happening somewhere else, we might ramp up testing somewhere else. So I think we want to be thoughtful and flexible, but the goal would be to try to test everyone with some regularity.
Got it. I think there is one more for NYU, which is someone has wrote in and asked that if most professors will not do in-person classes, are professors willing to do in-person classes? And if not, why are we bringing students back to the city?
So we, de-densified our classroom. So, at the state mandate, we, most of our larger classes are being taught remotely. Some that are smaller are being taught in person, and at least, and I'm not sort of on the academic side, but my understanding is the faculty is there and willing to come back to teach the number of either fully in-person classes, or at least the blended classes that are both in person and remote. So I've not heard about a shortage of people to teach, but again, not my area. But the plan that was developed seems to be moving forward.
Got it. I kind of want to get over kind of a really big question, and there were kind of questions that were submitted around enforcement, as well as, I feel that a lot of residents who have been here for the last 5 months have been strictly following quarantine, and now I know it's not going to be the same density coming back, but just the idea of people returning that maybe haven't been in this, students that are returning that maybe haven't been in the city the whole time, and maybe don't realize the hardship that a lot of residents are continuing to do in the quarantine and the social distancing and all of that. And this is for both institutions, kind of how, and it's hard because it's in public space. So the idea of the ingress and egress of the overcrowding on sidewalks, and what is the vehicle for both institutions for residents to voice these concerns? And I know it's hard. It's not as though students are walking around with an NYU or a New School shirt on, so it's hard to even know who's affiliated with your university, but there is going to be a general, student population look that people will associate with it. So this is kind of a really loaded question, but I know it's top of mind for the people that have tuned in tonight and that are tuning in. And so kind of what's the enforcement mechanism, and how can they communicate to each of your institutions about their concerns directly?
Certainly anytime anyone can email me. My contact information is on the website, but certainly, Valerie, you can provide that. We're always happy to talk and see if we can't work something out to everybody's satisfaction. In terms of enforcement, we are also requiring all members of our community to agree to a shared responsibility statement, that asks for everyone to behave ethically, responsibly, and with the best interests of their friends, colleagues, and neighbors in mind. I will say that as part of the reintroduction of our students, they have received a great deal of information via email. We are requiring all students who are going to live in Cary Hall to attend a session on appropriate behavior. It's a 2-hour session that they will, again, attendance will be checked. They will not allowed to begin the school year without attending that. We believe that's really important. I see in the question box, something that we're all concerned about is, can you ensure that an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 22-year-old is going to comply at all times? I wish I could say we can promise that. I can't, but we are, we do have in the dorms what we are referring to in a slightly different way from formally from a resident advisor is a community advisor who is going to be there to ensure that students are behaving as they should, that protocols are being followed, that the community both within the dorm and outside are being respected in the ways they should be. Again, I would love to say that that's foolproof. I can't, but we are taking as many steps as we can to ensure that.
Great.
Carlo, do you want me to start a little bit?
I think go ahead, sure, and then
Okay.
I'll fill in.
Okay, so I think, in terms of, I touched a little bit during my presentation. So, in response to COVID and the behavioral expectations it imposes, the university made several changes to the university-wide student code of conduct policy, as well as to our employees and faculty. In particular, note the policy provides clarification regarding off-campus conduct and the university's enforcement policy when behavior jeopardizes the health and safety of the community. And I'm not just talking about, inside our buildings, but I'm talking about the general community. And it's a shared responsibility. So students who engage in these repeated or egregious behaviors counter the expectations set forth in the student conduct policy, as well as all the health and safety protocols that we're putting in place, will face disciplinary action, whether that is banning them from certain buildings or they would have to leave campus. I know there's going to be different layers. I don't have specifics right now, but it is something that we are taking seriously and looking at. I know that we've communicated, just like Amy mentioned, extensively through parents, through our students, even before they're coming back. There's a mandatory training module to talk a little bit about that. And then we also have our student health ambassadors. I mean, can I say, again, an 18-year-old is going to strictly adhere? I wish I could say yes, but there will be layers. There will be, our office is always open. I mean, Carter knows this, and other people that I've worked with. I've been at NYU for 10 years doing community engagement. Like, our office is the resource, so we would be the point people. I will share our email with Valerie, and she could share that's community.engagement@nyu.edu. And I'll put that in the chat in our main line. So people will be able to come to our office if they see egregious behavior happening. We can't, I think a lot of people do ask about off campus, right? Like, what happens off campus, or what happens for those students living in apartments? We don't have watchful eye on every single last person in New York City. We can only do our best. And I think we're going to rely on the community also to call us out. I've said this before. It's like, if you see something, say something and let us know, because this affects everyone. It's not just, the students, the faculty, our employees. It affects everyone in New York City. And this is big. I mean, we want to keep our numbers down. I think the governor's also relying on us. I don't think he would allow universities to open if he didn't strictly have all these regulations and policies in place. And we're really serious about this, because it's scary. I think when this all happened in March, I didn't think we would be in the same position that we are in right now, talking via Zoom, and here we are still, So yeah, that's just kind of touching upon it. I don't know, Carlo, if you wanted to add anything else.
I would just say on the student behavior side, because I know that is such a concern for everyone, legitimately, that I've been in, Arlene, as you said, college health for 22 years now. And, what I've learned is, you simply can't tell a student, here's what you need to do. It doesn't work around drug and alcohol use. It doesn't work around sexual health. And a thoughtful approach with both policies that, clearly delineate what the penalties may be for misbehavior, but also social norming what we expect to be appropriate behavior are key. And that's why I think, Arlene, you mentioned our public health ambassador program as a way peer-to-peer to encourage that appropriate behavior. One of the reasons I think I have so much optimism about potential success is that in New York, we went from being the epicenter of the outbreak to really being one of the few states that has had low transmission rates, kept them low. And I remember every time during, spring and summer, Memorial Day, people are going to the beach, they're having barbecues, they're having parties, we're going to see a big spike. Didn't happen. 4th of July, same thing. Even with the Black Lives Matters protests where people thought, people are shouting, they're, bunched together. For the most part, people did the right things. And I think within New York, there will be tremendous peer pressure for people to adhere to what are appropriate behaviors, whether that's wearing a mask, whether that is staying home if you're sick, washing your hands, making sure you're staying, appropriate distance from people. So, I think all of those work in our favor, that New York will provide that social norming for some of the students coming from other places. And frankly, students come because they're coming because they want to be back in school, and they know the penalty for not behaving. If case counts go up, we are going to be in the same boat that other schools are in. Where you're seeing some case counts go up, and schools have now gone remote. And frankly, if case counts in those schools continue to go up, they may have to send students home. So again, I think we are lucky in New York that so much of that has been really embedded in behaviors here in New York State and New York City.
Great, and thank you. You really touched on kind of what I know a lot of people are seeing in the news by just kind of generally addressing the case counts going up, and that there are some institutions out there as recently as today that have rolled back. So I think that we have addressed that issue. Kind of the other one is kind of, I know that I know NYU specifically and the new school both have students returning within the week that are coming from out of state and now quarantining for that start date. I know, so that's great. And I've heard about the tent happening on the plaza for NYU specifically, but I know the question on a lot of people's minds that are joining in tonight is what happens, that's all kind of a set right date, like 2 days people are coming in, but, what happens Labor Day weekend? What happens when, we still have, the state, the governor still has, over 30 states on that travel advisory list, and so kind of how, once it's not people all coming at one time, and this is for both institutions, kind of how are you going to track, people that are leaving your campuses and going to the, going back home to these states for a weekend trip or whatnot, and then them kind of returning in this staggered manner that's not all uniform like it's happening right now. So I'd love to hear what that plan is.
We have a small community. We will require notification if anyone plans to travel from campus. If they are going to a hotspot state, they will need to then comply with the same 2-week quarantine before they'd be allowed back on our campus. We have advised students, we can't tell them not to, but we have advised students not to travel until an appropriate break. For those who are living on campus, and again, it's a very small number, if they had to go home and it didn't make sense to come back, they would just complete the year from whatever location they went to. So I think, that's incredibly important to us as well. And we plan to follow very closely what behaviors they're exhibiting and what kind of plans they make. This is part of the agreement that they must inform us.
And I would say the same is true at NYU. We built in questions related to travel. And again, this is not just for students, but for faculty and staff as well. I think all schools, as part of the states' requirements have some sort of daily sort of screener, if you will. We've embedded travel questions in that as well, asking if people have traveled. And if they say yes, because the travel states sort of are constantly changing, we will actually do the check to see if they travel to a state that's a hotspot, and then they don't sort of pass that day's daily screener, and they're not allowed into buildings. And then one of the member of our team will reach out to them, and they're essentially P&G'd from the university until we clarify what their travel history was, and ensure either that they are now quarantining or are getting tested, or whatever the protocol would be depending on where they went.
You said P&G. What
I'm
is?
sorry, persona non grata, where you sort of basically bar someone from being, coming into buildings. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, I just figured somebody might have that question, so I thought I'd ask.
Yep.
So just to kind of be clear, because I know I'm seeing some stuff in the chat that NYU does have an email address that we will send out that is your hotline to reach out to them proactively about what you see and any violations. And I know I'll have one from the new school, so we'll have those to send out that neighborhood residents will have a direct line of communication to both institutions, and they welcome the feedback. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because there was some confusion in the chat. Those are really kind of the.
I did see one question. I just want to say, and I know that I could probably say this is true for NYU, and I think it's already been said, but we will require our students to wear masks. They are going to be required to follow social distancing guidelines. This is all part of this training, as I had mentioned, at least for our students, which includes, by the way, videos and all sorts of things, to help reinforce this and ensure that they are constantly being reminded, along with our community advisor in Carrie Hall. But we take this very seriously. We're requiring them to follow guidelines that we all would ask ourselves to do, our friends to do. It's how we make our decisions. This is all part of the experience. It's a changed experience, but it's certainly a great, I'd much rather wear a mask, and I think most people would, than not be able to, be well or go outside or do things. So, just bear that in mind, that this is all part of the requirements and the agreements and the promises that we're asking everyone to make. And that includes, of course, our staff who are on campus.
Great. I'm going to open it up to the committee if anyone on the committee has questions.
Sure. Have you discussed the doomsday scenario? You have clusters of positive tests. What is the worst case scenario, and how do you alert the community? And I'm actually it's more directed towards NYU, I think, than the new school. And there's a two-part question. Is there any different stipulations for off-campus students? Like they have to live within walking distance to minimize their exposure? And there's another question about meals. What places is NYU and recommending to eat? So I guess it's a three-pronged question.
So are we talking food in general, like during the semester? Where are we, or?
No, food in general. So you can't serve campus food, correct? So how do students eat?
So, I mean, again, I don't know, Arlene, if you want to speak to dining, I'll say a little bit about what I know. I think the plan for dining is to be phased in. I will say during the quarantine period, they will have meals delivered to their floors so that they do not leave quarantine. I think the initial plan with dining is basically grab and go in a way that minimizes contact. I know that dining service has done a complete contactless system for grab and go. And then I think, much like has been done at the state level, if things go well for X number of weeks, there would be a phased in plan for opening up dining services with limited capacity. And, again, sort of expanding that if things stay well. So that's dining, and that is within the dining services at NYU.
And off campus?
Off campus, I think, people are sort of on their own for deciding where they want to go to eat. I mean, obviously in the city, there's still limited, dining in terms of indoor dining. So again, I think, people will either cook at home, order, take out, or pick up, or eat outside, as many people are doing now, at least while the weather is still nice. So, and again, Arlene, if you know sort of more about dining, but that's my understanding of the dining plan. The other parts of your question?
The last part of the question is, so you have off-campus students who aren't monitored the same as the on-campus students. Any stipulations that are provided, any extra testing, or is there anything additional that you are requiring for those off-campus students?
So what I would say is not additional, but I think the same guidelines and the same monitoring will largely apply to anyone who lives off campus as on campus, meaning if they want to get into a building, they have to still fill out that daily symptom screener. If they don't do the required testing, the entry testing, they will not have their ID cards turned on, so they won't be able to access buildings. So they'll be part of the ongoing monitoring testing as well, required to wear masks. So all of that, I don't view there to be any significant differences, obviously because their home is not an NYU building. They're essentially free to do what they want in their own home. And as was said before, we can't really control that piece. But I would say most of the other rules and guidelines as they relate to behaviors largely apply to even students off campus.
And then the last question, which leads up to it, is what is the doomsday scenario? What point is considered is opening campus a failure, and do you have to backtrack? And how do you safely get the students either home, or is everyone quarantined? What is the plan?
Yeah, so we do have what we call the red team, which is tasked exactly with that scenario. What do we do if things go bad? So it is being planned for. One of the things Arlene noted earlier is that our residence halls now have been de-densified to the point where pretty much everyone could sort of quarantine in place if needed. We have set aside about 5% of our housing stock for true isolation rooms if we have 6 students. So again, in a worst case scenario, I mean, I think we could sort of internally, quote unquote, lock down. Just to get back to what I said before, we don't want to wait till we get to the edge of that where we've now filled every isolation bed, and because I think everyone knows the growth of cases can be exponential, and it can be just a matter of a couple of weeks before you go from a couple of cases to dozens of cases to hundreds of cases. So our goal is to be as aggressive as we can early, monitor early, and I think very early on, if we see things even slightly going in the wrong direction, perhaps be more restrictive than we are already. And again, not wait for things to get to quote unquote doomsday. Because again, I think by then it will be very difficult. And I think obviously, lessons learned in March, it was chaotic across all of higher ed, where basically everyone was told, pack up, you have 24 hours to leave. And I think it was ultimately the right decision, I think in retrospect. But again, I think the goal would be to avoid that. And there is more intentional planning. And I think there would be much more aggressive earlier intervention depending on what we see case counts do in these first couple of weeks.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your question, Dan. Bob Ely?
Yes, my questions really are for NYU because the new school is not everything's gonna be virtual learning. So I guess my questions with regards to NYU are a couple. One is NYU requiring students to sign waivers to attend the dorms and live on campus at the school? That's my first question. And then the second question really has to do with the number of students. You had indicated that it'd be about 50% occupancy, at least in terms of the dorms. What does that mean in terms of how many students? So I suspect that, and if you could, there's undergraduates. So the undergraduates, what type of undergraduates are more likely to be, what in terms of percentages, are we talking about freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and then graduate students, so law students? How how many students are we talking about are coming into our community to live in dorms?
So in terms of dorms, so we typically house about 11, and Carlo, you can correct me if I get this wrong, like 11,000 students or so, 11,500. We are housing less than 40% of that currently in dorms because we're de-densifying those dorms, right? So as Carlo mentioned, there's not going to be that many students per room purposely. That's following strict, guidelines and protocols that we have from the state. In terms of your first question, I don't know the answer to that first question. Carlo, I don't know if you know about waivers or anything that students
I
need to
don't think
sign.
so. I don't think they are signing a waiver, but don't hold me to that. I know that there is this code of conduct.
That they are signing, yeah.
Right. I don't think the university is requiring a waiver either to attend or to live in residence. But again, I am not 100% sure of that.
Yeah, I can get back to you on
I'm sorry.
that. I can get back to you guys on that because I'm not entirely sure. We're not sure.
Yeah, and then last but not least, in terms of your schedule at NYU, when are you starting and when are you ending? And is your schedule situated so that the students are not, are not made to travel over Thanksgiving and then come back for Christmas and that type of thing?
So in terms of the schedule, students from quote unquote quarantine states are actually moving in tomorrow. There's probably between tomorrow and Wednesday, I want to say about 26 or 2,700 students are moving in, and those are ones from the quote unquote restricted states. So it gives them the 2 full weeks to quarantine before classes start, which is on September 2nd, I believe. And I know there was a question about how are we going to feed them, but we are providing 3 meals a day to students who are in quarantine. So that's the group that's coming in then. As far as Thanksgiving, I think the university position right now is they will encourage students, if they do go home for Thanksgiving, to stay home. Although I do not believe today there will be an official end to the semester on Thanksgiving. But again, I think they will encourage students who do go home for Thanksgiving to stay home because I believe they will try to do many of the final exams remotely, if at all possible.
And just to follow up, are there any fall breaks where kids might be traveling?
Arlene, do you know the schedule this year? I know there is traditionally one fall break in October, more like a long weekend than a true fall break. But yeah. I don't know if that has been either taken out of the schedule or is just out of the schedule this year because of the way the calendar falls. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'll follow up on that one as well. I'm not sure if they removed it.
And yet, I'm sorry, yet another follow-up to that question.
No, it's okay.
If they go home or they go out of the dorm for a long weekend or Labor Day weekend or a school break of some sort, or even Thanksgiving, what's the protocols for them coming back on? Is there going to be quarantine again? What's the story there?
We did address that a little bit earlier, but go ahead and.
Yeah, I mean, if they're still on, if they go to a state that is still on the state quarantine list, and that's still something that, is a state mandate, and they would be expected to quarantine. And, I think as you've seen, the state has taken that exceedingly seriously. I mean, we have looked at the requirements for quarantine, and they are, fairly austere and draconian in terms of the quarantine. And I know that when people are flying into airports, I think you heard New York City had checkpoints at some areas. And again, we will ask about travel as a matter of routine of everyone. And if people, indicate that they traveled, we will then enforce the quarantine to the extent that we can. Obviously easier if they're residential students. If they're living off campus, then a little bit on them to ensure that they're quarantining. Again, we can restrict access to university buildings, but we'll rely on them to quarantine appropriately. We'll check in with them during the quarantine period to follow up, but we'll have a little bit less ability to monitor our non-residential students than our residential students.
Great, and I know that our chair, Carter Booth, had a question, but since he's also a host, you can't raise your hand. So Carter?
Yeah, so I just had a brief question. One of the concerns just from talking to people in the past week or two with NYU returning is sort of the first couple of weeks And, you know, we know everybody in the community knows those first week or two, you start to see the students really where we see them is populating a lot of the parks, and the seating becomes less available for those of us who walk around in the community. And there's a lot of concern that suddenly, you know, an increase in contact with the students and moving around that's really the underlying concern. And then it translates into moving between classes, really sort of that bulk collection point around Washington Square Park. What kind of engagement, or what are you telling your students about that? You know, that's going to be as a community, our first engagement, and what people who may not be aware, that's what they're going to see first. So what are you sharing with the students, or, you know, is there anything that you're talking about with those activities, or clustering around some of the dorms outside? You know, if they're not able to congregate inside, that's the first thing they're going to do is go out right in front of the dorm and stand around and talk to each other. So what kind of guidance are you giving them on those types of activities?
I mean, I can start, and Arlene, feel free to,
Yep.
you know, add in. So certainly I think the messaging just around physical distancing will be there, right? So, you know, trying to not have them cluster or congregate, one. Two, one of the things that the university has been very thoughtful about, and again, we'll have to see how it plays out, is that we obviously have somewhat restricted indoor space because of the distancing requirements, capacity requirements. So the university is being somewhat thoughtful about trying to generate more outdoor study space. And that might include anything from repurposing the tent on West 4th Street that's currently being used for testing into, you know, potential study space. I know that they are looking to partnering with companies like WeWorks and others to generate more study space, not directly on campus per se. Again, knowing that there will be need for that type of place just to go sit, study, be with other people. So it is something the university is planning for. So I think between messaging to students that you need to distance, but we're also going to provide you with some opportunities and space to be able to go to different places. You know, can I make a guarantee that the park is not going to be crowded? You know, it often is on a nice day. And, you know, I suspect that will be at least partially true in the fall. Again, the one number that we don't have rock solid is how many students are going to be back, because we know how many students are in residence. We know how many students are registered for classes that potentially are in person. But for example, we could have someone who's not in residence taking all remote classes, but frankly could live, you know, somewhere right in the heart of Greenwich Village, and they just happen to be taking all their classes remote, and may decide to access the library, the student center, you know, and other university resources. So it's been a little bit difficult to pin a hard number. You know, I think we're guesstimating maybe 60 to 65% of students will be quote unquote around. But that is just a guess, because it's been very hard to pin that number who are either not in residence or taking in-person classes that we know will be here.
Yeah, and just, you know, one of the things, I think Washington Square Park, I mean, anybody who's been around there recently, has definitely been a little busier this summer than it has been in the past at a lot of times, you know, because people are using it for, you know, it's a place to go and hang out since you can't be inside anywhere. And you know, there's often not many benches that are available already. The grass is often covered, you know, with people hanging out. So there's really, you know, and I think that's where the concern is. It just sort of fills it up to another level that some people are definitely going to be much more concerned about that. And it's an impact that's very difficult, I think, to address, but it's very real to those of us in the community. And I know in the past, when it's been warm out, professors have taken classes out to the park to teach in the park. You know, it's sort of, you know, it seems that it's a resource that's already heavily used by the community now. And so it's nice to hear you're exploring some other areas, but it's something that I anticipate hearing about, but just raising it now since the city has been very quiet, and you know, we're starting to see an uptick in people coming back to our community in the last week and a half. So it's a big concern.
Yeah. I will say, I don't think there is any plan to formally conduct classes in Washington Square Park. I think despite the classroom pinch, I think the university, for a whole host of reasons, has not opted for outdoor classes. So at least the formal outdoor class in the park should not happen, or at least as far as I've heard. So that shouldn't be a concern. I think you're right, because indoor spaces are more limited. I think people are out in public spaces like Washington Square Park, but again, I think there will be significantly fewer students on campus, and you know, hopefully that will offset that at least to a degree.
Thanks.
Valerie, you're on mute, Valerie.
You think that I would have mastered
It's okay.
saying really eloquent things. Thank you. Thank you, Arlene. I just want to be cognizant of time. I know it's 7:45, 7:46, and I know that Dr. Ciotoli had a very limited time with us. So if you need to peel off, feel free to. I am going to open it up. I know that if there are questions that come up that are medically concerned, we will get those to Arlene, who will get those to Dr. Ciotoli, and we will do a follow-up email. So I just want to be cognizant of your time, Dr. Ciotoli. I know it's about to be with tomorrow and Wednesday happening, so if you need to peel off, please do. But I am going to open it up to the public for questions. I will, you have 2 minutes. I know I've tried to go through most of them in the chat, but you will have 2 minutes, and please know that we are trying to get the questions asked at, like, not really statements. This is really supposed to be an informational conversation and a dialogue, and please know that we will make sure that the questions that were in do get circulated, and if they weren't answered directly here, and we will get those answers out. So if there's anyone from the public, and I do see we do have a few from elected officials on the call as well. So if there are any questions, oh, okay, great. I've got, and board members, I will get to you in just a few minutes. I just want to quickly get some questions from the public, and then we will get to you. Thank you. So here we go. Barbara Backer, I know you had submitted some questions as well, and I think we might have covered some of them, but please let us know what you've got right now.
Yes, thank you very much. You did answer some of them. I'd just like to make a small statement and then a couple of questions. To me, I live in NYU housing. The campus, the community is not an esoteric thing that we call the community. It's people living on campus. I think that's a fact that has to be considered. There are many of us who live on campus. We don't come to campus. We don't live near campus. We live on campus. We have faculty and students and staff in our buildings. And we all have worked very hard, the ones who have stayed here through the 6 months, to get this transmission rate down to less than 1%. So to those of us who are on campus, we consider ourselves as part of campus. And so I see the NYU plan needing to address things in a triangle: community, students, faculty. We are not separate. We're not an idea. We are people. We have suffered. We have had our friends die. I'm a health professional. I have had coworkers die from this. This is not something that we just list. It's something that we feel very, very strongly about. We feel very strongly about the crowds of students every time classes change. If I walk from the square up to 14th Street, I sometimes can't get through the crowds. They're even before the pandemic. I was in the park today. There are young people, they don't have NYU shirts on, but they are not masking. They're not social distancing. So my point is, please consider us in your planning that we are part of the community. We are not off campus, we are the campus. And we feel very strongly about these edicts and about enforcing things. Try to come into the village on a Saturday night. You're leaving the behavioral factors of students out of the dorms up to New Yorkers. We've worked very hard, to have all these young people on a weekend drinking at our bars, eating at our restaurants, not cognizant of.
Barbara, I want to make sure that we get to your question, especially if it's medical related. While we've got Dr. Ciotoli, he's got very limited time, so we could get to your question specifically.
Okay, my question is really, what can you do about maintaining the social distancing and wearing of masks outside your buildings? Because outside your buildings, it is the campus, but it's also our home. So what can really be done on enforcing it other than leaving us to report? I don't want to be a police person reporting students. They're not wearing a mask, this kind of thing. What can be built in here, if anything, is extremely important in the changing of classes, in the distancing, in our contact with the students. Because we have daily contact. If I go to the laundry room, there's students there. If I go to the mail room, there's students there.
I'm going to let both institutions answer for you. Thank you very much for your question, Barbara, and for emailing us. And I believe I got 2 notes from you as well. So thank you very much for your time, for coming this evening. So I'm going to let them answer. Thank you.
I mean, I would just go back on the sort of what can we do to ensure that they're wearing masks all the time and sort of adhering to the behaviors that we want is that, we can report people and, for many things that is absolutely part of what we need to do. But again, I think creating those social norms that this is what we are doing for each other collectively. And one thing that, is not really fluff, but I think a core component of what the university is doing is a campaign around, keeping each other safe. And that extends out into the broader community. It is not just in NYU. I think there has to be sort of that mutual acceptance that if you're interacting at all and, NYU's in and of the city motto, plays out that we need to be thoughtful about, as was said, people in the community are part of the NYU community. I think we are looking at, yes, the enforcement piece, but perhaps more importantly, that norming piece of this is the expectation for being here back at school for everyone. And I have to say, it has worked in the city. It has worked in the state. Does it mean everyone wears a mask all the time? No. But I think we have enough compliance and people have enough respect for that, that is what has led to low rates of transmission. Do we think every New Yorker is perfect? No. But again, I think we have enough compliance, which is, I think, what we're hoping for with our community, that people really adhere to this because they know and feel that it is the right thing to do. And again, where we have that recidivism, we're going to have fairly strict compliance. And I think the university's made clear up to and including, suspension and expulsion. If you don't want to follow the rules, you can't be here. I do think that they are serious about really having low tolerance for people who aren't compliant. I think with masks, sure, you forgot, you were outside. But again, I think there's going to be little tolerance for repeat offenses like that. And I think the university's made that clear. It's in the code of conduct. And I think they're absolutely committed to enforcing that. From the start of the semester.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to now go to, I don't see other questions from the public, so I'm going to go to Michael Levine, CB2 board member.
Hello, thank you very much for being here. I will be very glad to see our students returning to NYU. I feel as though there has been a lack somehow in the neighborhood, but I do appreciate the problem that so many of us have with perhaps the streets may be too crowded again. But my question is a little bit different. Can NYU do something to assist the businesses in our neighborhood? The Community Board 2 businesses had suffered terribly in the pandemic, as they have across the city and the nation and the world. And I'm wondering if NYU can encourage those who are returning to campus and those who aren't on campus to stay safe, stay healthy, shop in the neighborhood, patronize our local businesses. Let's help keep Greenwich Village healthy as you keep yourself healthy. I think it would be a very good campaign for NYU to initiate as the students return to campus, as the students return to school. We're glad to see them come back. We want them to be safe, and we want them to patronize our neighborhood businesses. Arlene, do you think it would be possible to do something like that for the returning students?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I've been working, I've been talking to the Village Alliance and as well as the Unisquare partnership, just a little bit more about that and how we can really support our local businesses and who's open. I know there's already so many resources online through the local bids that we're gonna go ahead and work through student activities to make sure it's on our NYU app, our Welcome app. Obviously, these students that are coming in now are in quarantine, so they cannot go anywhere. They have to stay, but they can get delivery services. So we're trying to work that out. So we have resources directly through the bids on the NYU app and shared with our students. And we can't forget about the faculty and employees as well. So we're trying to work through mechanisms to share that information, especially now that we have, I'm gonna get the program on the open restaurants program or the open streets program with the restaurants on the weekends. I think that's a really good thing to include, especially for our faculty that are coming back on the weekends.
Great,
So yeah,
and
then if there's any ideas also, I mean, Valerie and Michael and anyone here in the community that if you guys think about that we can be sharing those resources with the NYU community, I'm more than happy to hear them. I don't have all the answers, but we'll try to make sure that we share as much information as possible with those that are coming back.
Great. Yeah. And I think both for the new school and NYU, I think it's important to, I know there were some things in the chat about the idea that the outdoor dining that's happening now, and doesn't have a hard stop at 11, and some places are closing at 9 or ending service at 9, but just kind of, I know I know that will be important to communicate, and also the to-go drink type of thing that was happening, and knowing how college students are. So just, I guess just making sure that, and I'll send you some resources for that.
Great. Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So,
Valerie, I just want to let you guys know that I am going to jump off.
Yes,
Feel free
sure.
to call any additional specific medical help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I appreciate the chance to
time.
answer questions.
Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, Carlo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go next to Matt Metzger, a CB2 board member, had a question. I know has been waiting.
Michael always asks my question before me and always does it way more eloquently than I ever would. So I'm always a little bit annoyed, but I'll ask it a little bit differently. My guess is you have no idea what it is, right? Off the top of your head, and that's fine. But I'll ask that you come back to us with it, and it's a number I'm going to probably annoy you with over every meeting from here on out, which is what % of your spend, NYU's spend, is from contractors or businesses in Community Board 2?
I do not have that number, but I will get. Yep.
That is totally understandable. Totally reasonable.
It's a good question. No, yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, so I don't want to diminish the concerns of some of our neighbors. I'm sure some of them certainly are legitimate. I know I'm excited about a return to normalcy if we can get it there. How can Community Board 2 and the CB2 community be, and this is frankly more for the new school than NYU, support your institution? Would be the only other question.
How can you support the new school? That's a lovely thing to say, and thank you so much for thinking of that. We're going to try and be a really good neighbor, as we always hope we are and strive to be. Just let us know if we need to be mindful of things that we're not seeing. I mean, honestly, that's the best we can do. We have such a small community coming back, and thinking about the impact for local businesses. I don't know that we have a huge one on their fortunes, unfortunately. But no, seriously, thank you so much. That's a lovely thing to say. Just make sure that we know and we can, you know, when we can be helpful and how to be the best neighbor we can.
And I'll ask it to NYU too. I don't want to cut NYU out.
No, I mean, again,
You guys have a little bit more meat on the bone to weather this.
No, I mean, I think I appreciate, you know, Valerie and Carter and we spoke maybe a month ago. I think it was a month and a half ago, just about this meeting and about getting together. And I really appreciated the outreach. And I think that that's what I want to continue to do. You know, just to be our office to be a resource, and any ideas, inquiries, concerns that you guys have. I mean, you know, that's what we're here for. And, you know, time will tell, I guess. You know, I didn't expect we were going to be in this situation right now, to be quite honest. And I know I'm in Westchester. I miss the village and I miss coming back. So I hope that at some point a new normal, whatever that is, returns soon.
Thank you so much, Amy and Arlene. And Matt, thank you for your very thoughtful question. Carter, I know, has a question and can't raise his hand because he's also hosting. So,
and so Matt and Michael had also asked a good portion of my question, but one of the concerns from, you know, with a lot of your younger students is how they connect with businesses, particularly food ordering.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are ways that the students can directly connect with the businesses instead of using the apps, it's much more beneficial
okay.
to the local businesses. And it's and for both, you know, the new school, which is more concentrated in one place, but for NYU, it really makes a big difference. I think the fees right now are just 10%, but that adds up for food and beverages, obviously. And it's just something to perhaps consider with some of the businesses that are close by to your dorms, inquiring with them if there are more direct ways
to
that they can connect instead of using any of the app services. And it also helps develop, you know, the direct relationships with the students and the businesses, which is probably much more unique right now than it has been in the past. So I know everybody's looking forward to you guys coming back, you know, whether it's the delis, bodegas, you know, the small restaurants. I think they're really excited. And also, I guess, a platform for them to maybe communicate to the students how they might be different. You know, a lot of businesses have reworked their models, their food. Either it's a little more expensive or more affordable, you know, particularly with the delivery. So that might be something, just more the direct communication. And I think the bids is a great first step for sure, but maybe even some more direct connection and canvassing the areas around there could really make a big difference.
Yeah, I know that we have in the past, outside of the bids, tried to supply students with a list of like a lot of the local restaurants that maybe are in their price point in the area. So I think that we'll continue to push that as well. That might not be on the bids listing. So I agree with you, Carter. But that's a good point about just shopping more local versus on an app like DoorDash or Chow Now or Seamless because of those fees. It's something that we can stress for sure.
That's a great point. Thank you, Carter. I don't see any other questions. And Matt's great. Do you have another question, or is your hand? Okay, you took it off. Great. I don't see any other questions from the public. We're going to quickly go into business session. Oh, I see one quick hand. 1 second. We have one question from Elizabeth Healy. And Elizabeth, I know that you did write into us as well. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. But you have 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, very quickly. Sure. I'm just wondering if NYU can tell us the percentage of students who are coming in from restricted states, from COVID restricted states, the percentage of students who are returning who are from those states that are currently on the hot list for New York.
So I think Carlo touched upon this. What we do know right now for the restricted states that are coming into residential housing, it's about 2,600 students. I do not have a number for those that are maybe potentially, you know, are coming into New York City and renting their own apartments. I don't have that number, but maybe it's something that I could get back to you, Valerie, with information I can find out if we have that number.
That would be great. Yeah, I know a lot. I know a lot of people would be interested in that information just for peace of mind. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Just mute. Okay, so we're going to quickly go into business session. I think, you know, I don't really think that there's a resolution to come out of this. I think it was just really to give the public an idea and a voice. You know, we try to extend this as far into the summer as possible, just kind of knowing that this is an ever-evolving living organism thing that could be changing in the next hour or the next 30 minutes for all we know, and tomorrow. So, and especially with NYU in the next 2 days, I know we'll all be listening and watching closely, and I know that both Amy and Arlene will be in touch with us, and we will get you, you know, we will get the rest of the public the information to contact them directly, but CB2 is also a resource to hear that information as well, but just so that you can directly reach out. So I just want to open the floor to the rest of the committee if you have any comments on what we heard tonight. Yeah, I'll just kind of go there if anyone wants to comment from the committee. Okay, anyone? Well, with that, if there's no other comments from the committee, I will let everyone know that our next, this is again part of our Restarting Together series by the Reopening Working Group for CB2, and we will be doing Restarting Together museums next month. As you know, next week, museums in New York City are allowed to open at a 25% occupancy. So again, we've been kind of waiting to launch this series, kind of knowing that there's a lot that's been in flux. And so hopefully we will use that time. That will be Thursday, September 24th. So there will have been almost about a month right to the date of institutions having opened up their doors. And within that time, we could see that percentage of cultural institution percentage could increase. So we'd really like to use that as a forum to hear how it's going, and also to allow those museum and cultural professionals to knowledge share and idea share from what they're seeing. So please stay tuned for the institutions that will be participating in that. But I would like to wrap up this meeting. We're right at 8:07. So I just really want to thank our guests. I already thanked Dr. Ciotoli from NYU. He had to leave. And thank you, Arlene, for kind of bringing that in today. Thank you so much. I know that was helpful for everyone. And thank you for your presentation, Arlene, and your partnership, and Amy and Mary from the New School. Thank you so much again for your partnership as well. You know, I think that's really the key here, is that this is a very important partnership to CB2 and ensuring that, you know, we are that triangle that someone had mentioned of working with each institution to ensure that New York continues to stay at 1% or below, and to ensure that we all are able to coexist together and to have these students back supporting our local businesses, which is so important, but also not at the expense of public health, of course. But also just to reiterate that this is an ongoing dialogue. This is just the really, again, the start, and we delayed this because we wanted to make sure we were getting you the most up-to-date information, since so much has changed just within days and weeks. So with that, if there's any follow-up questions from the chat, I'm going to go through that if they weren't addressed, or if they weren't addressed from what was submitted. I thank you, everyone who took the time to be on this Zoom tonight, as well as taking the time to submit your questions. Please, anyone that's tuning into this call, if there's someone that you know that couldn't make it tonight, or would benefit from this information, we did stream this live on the Manhattan Community Board 2 Facebook page, so you can find the video there and feel free to share it or tag people in it. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Arlene, Amy, and Mary.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Have
everyone.
a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you, Valerie.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.